In the darkness of the Barents Sea, the cold wind from the Arctic swept down like a knife, sweeping straight into the boiling sea surface in chaos. The war between Russia and Ukraine not only changed the political map of the continent, but also upset the economic balance of the Northern Ocean. King crab shipping routes from Russia, which had fed the US and Japanese markets for decades, were blocked in just a few hours. A gap of hundreds of millions of dollars appeared and spread like a crack in thin ice. In the silence of the ocean, Norway suddenly became the only fulcrum for a thirsty world. A billion-dollar empire rose from the chaos of war. And the first question for us is whether this rise is a golden opportunity or the beginning of an irreversible spiral of instability. Grand Discover: how Russia's deadly war created Norway's $1 billion king crab empire. The Barents Sea is cold and dark. Amidst the dense currents, the war between Russia and Ukraine suddenly brought this sea into a new order. Seafood routes that once transported king crab from Russia to the US, Japan, and Europe were cut off overnight. Hundreds of millions of dollars worth of supply evaporated from the market, leaving a void no one had ever imagined. King crab prices skyrocketed, and high-end restaurant chains across Asia had to find a single alternative source. Quietly and without a word to the world, Norway became the new center of the entire Western king crab market. A new empire was born from chaos. And the question immediately arises, is this rise a historic opportunity or a sign of an ecological destabilization never before seen in the Arctic? The king crab is not native to Europe. It was brought from the Pacific by the Soviet Union and released into the Murmansk region in the 1960s. The original goal was to create a stable source of food and protein for northern coastal communities. But king crab grew too fast. From an initial few thousand, they expanded their territory down to the Norwegian coast. The appearance of a giant deep-sea predator has divided scientists. Some say it is an ecological disaster, with the seabed being so thoroughly consumed that no trace of native species remains. Others saw the economic opportunity Norway could seize if it could control this invasive species. And then war broke out. The very species that was seen as an ecological threat became the basis of a billion-dollar-a-year industry. Winter in Finnmark and northern Norway is a test of survival. Winds reach more than 60 knots, or nearly 70 miles per hour, and waves 40 to 50 feet high, crashed directly into the bows of ships. The seawater is as cold as 28 to 30 degrees Fahrenheit and can freeze as soon as it touches the deck, forming ice several inches thick in just minutes. Fishermen must use steel hammers to break the ice before the weight builds up and the boat loses balance and capsizes. The strength of the bottom current can cause the pot line to twist or break if not calculated with absolute precision. The strong shock from the wave can throw a pot weighing hundreds of pounds off the deck and crash down like a moving block of steel. A good pot can hold between 70 and 120 king crabs, averaging between 8 and 12 pounds each. A good night's work can generate between $70,000 and $100,000 in revenue. In return, each trip is a real battle between man and the cold sea. Norwegian fishermen consider this a job that tests each person's limits, where experience, endurance, and precision determine whether they return or not. Before the war, Russia was the largest supplier of king crab to the United States and Japan. Hundreds of millions of dollars worth of king crab flowed from Kamchatka and Murmansk regions each year to huge consumer markets. When the U.S. banned all seafood from Russia, this flow stopped completely. Japan and South Korea sharply reduced imports due to logistical risks and sudden increases in transportation costs. The world market immediately fell into shortage. In that situation, Norway became the only option for Western countries. Exports increased rapidly. King crab prices rose from $20 to $25 per pound to $45 or even $60.
Count was 3-1.
Restaurants in the United States were forced to switch to Norwegian king crab, not only because of its consistent quality, but also because there were no other legal options. The Norwegian king crab industry became the center of a hungry global market.
Our last day of the first trip, so we're still on crab for our 40 pots. Hopefully we'll reach our goal of 30,000 crab this trip. We might be a little bit shy, but
in less than 2 years, the industry's turnover approached $1 billion. But this growth stood on a volatile foundation. It depended entirely on Russia's absence from the world market.
From the hopper! Oops, I'm sorry. Got so much water.
As soon as the ship docks, the king crab is transferred directly to a cold water tank system to keep it alive. This process only lasts a few minutes because the meat quality decreases very quickly if the crab is stressed for too long on the deck. Workers sort crabs based on size and shell hardness. Larger, meatier crabs are sent to the live export area. Weaker crabs are sent to the frozen processing area or have their claws cut off for separate export. Processing lines operate continuously for many hours a day. High-end markets such as the US, Japan, and Korea prefer live crabs because the value can be double or triple that of frozen ones. A 10 or 12-pound king crab can cost between $300 and $500 at a restaurant. Norwegian's logistics system uses refrigerated planes to fly directly to major commercial centers in Asia. A combination of precision fishing, live preservation technology, and cold chain transport has made Norway the world's most valuable supplier of king crab. King crabs are omnivores. They consume everything on the seafloor from mollusks, starfish, sea worms, to cod eggs. Some areas have been so wiped out that 70% of the benthic life has been lost. This has led to a heated debate between scientists and the fishing industry. One group fears that the king crab boom will severely devastate the Barents native ecosystem. The other group argues that the industry can control numbers with quotas and turn an invasive species into a steady source of revenue. The debate has never reached a clear conclusion, as both views have considerable data. However, the reality is that king crab production is more dependent on market prices and buyer demand than on the ecological condition of the seabed. This raises important questions. Are we exploiting a sustainable resource, or are we eroding the biological foundation of the entire Barents Sea? As Russia lost its western market, Norway naturally stepped into the gap. The king crab market was split into two separate and no longer directly connected parts. Prices were more dependent on geopolitics than ever. If the war continued, Norway would continue to maintain its monopoly on the Western market. If the war ended and the embargo was lifted, the entire Norwegian industry could face direct competition from the huge Russian supply. King crab has become a strategic product similar to oil and gas in the geopolitical picture. This shows that seafood is not only a source of food, but also a tool of influence between countries. a species once found only sporadically along the North American coast has now spread to Europe at an unprecedented rate, crossing thousands of miles of cold ocean to establish roots in the very fishing grounds that once belonged to native cod and crab. In these waters, the invasive lobsters not only thrive, but grow far beyond their original average size. Some reach more than 3 or 4 pounds with thick shells, large claws, and a higher level of aggression than native European lobsters. They occupy burrows, disrupt the seafloor structure, and force many mollusk species to the brink of local extinction. Ecologists call this a forced migration, where the strongest individuals push the entire benthic ecosystem into a defensive position. Norwegian fishermen know this all too well. After years of battling the invasive king crab, they are now faced with a new, faster, and more unpredictable enemy. The invasive lobster pots are designed to be smaller but more densely packed on the sea surface. It acts as a chain trap system, forcing the lobsters to go in and not being able to escape. Each pot can pull up 20 or 30 lobsters after just a few hours of immersion in the sea. The largest weighs several pounds, with a clamping force strong enough to crush large clam shells and reclaim any rock burrow they wish to occupy. But what's most worrying isn't their numbers or size. It's how quickly they're spreading. A recent study found that an invasive lobster population could expand its range by 20 to 30 miles per year in warming waters. Invasive lobster fishing techniques rely on cage trap systems that are capable of operating reliably in waters with high salinity and strong currents. The trap cage has a cylindrical or box-shaped structure made of galvanized steel to prevent rust, covered with thick nylon mesh, ensuring that lobsters can only enter but cannot escape when the flow changes direction. Each cage is baited with strong-smelling fatty fish to attract lobsters from dozens of meters away. Fishermen spread traps along routes several miles long on the sea surface and use a system of colored buoys to control each location. The traps are pulled using heavy-duty cables because invasive lobsters often compete for food in the cages and cause them to vibrate violently when pulled up. On days with high currents, the traps can spin or get stuck in troughs on the seafloor, forcing fishermen to handle them manually in cold, windy conditions. Each trap inspection cycle lasts several hours and requires absolute precision, as a mistake could cause the cage to spin and strike the deckhand. As soon as the lobsters are pulled up, they are quickly inspected visually to remove any that are seriously injured or show signs of disease. Exposure time to air must be less than a few minutes because invasive lobsters are susceptible to stress from large temperature differences. Fishermen place them in tanks of cold seawater cooled to 34 to 38 degrees Fahrenheit to keep them in a stable state. This process slows the lobster's circadian rhythm and limits water loss from the flesh. Lobsters larger than 3 pounds are usually kept in separate sorting tanks because they tend to attack and damage other individuals' claws. When the harvest is large enough, all the shrimp are transferred to a cold storage tank with seawater circulation to maintain stable temperature and salinity until the ship docks. The time from pulling up to entering the storage tank on shore only lasts about an hour to keep the meat quality at the highest level. At the plant, lobsters are transported directly to the receiving area and through an automated sorting system based on weight and claw size. The largest individuals are transferred to a live holding area for export to restaurants in the U.S., Japan, and Korea. Smaller individuals are fed into a high-speed processing line where workers handle each one with specialized cutting tools to separate the claws, body, and organs. The water is continuously cooled and sterilized throughout the process to ensure the meat is not oxidized and retains the characteristic sweetness of the cold water region. Larger pieces are packaged separately due to their high commercial value. The scraps, shells, and broken claws are transferred to the processing area to be turned into stock or paste for the high-end culinary industry. The factory operates almost non-stop during the peak season because every hour of delay directly affects the quality. Nordic quality control systems ensure that each product is consistent in terms of hygiene, weight, and freshness. Orders are packed in refrigerated containers and loaded onto cargo flights to international markets within hours of leaving the ship. The whole process creates a closed value chain where each invasive lobster is treated as a premium product of the cold water industry. Hunting invasive lobsters may seem less dangerous than hunting king crabs, but accidents in the cold water show otherwise. Strong currents can cause the trap's drag line to wrap around a fisherman's leg or arm in a fraction of a second and drag them into the 35-degree Fahrenheit sea, where survival is not likely to exceed a few minutes. Cages weighing tens of pounds can spin and smash into deckhands when large waves destabilize the boat. Fishermen have suffered broken ribs or head injuries when cages bounce off the edge of the deck and fall with the force of a small steel block. In the dark, locating the buoy traps becomes difficult, and many boats get caught in their own tow lines, causing serious rudder accidents. Large lobsters with powerful claws can pinch through thick rubber gloves and cause the trap handler to lose balance right at the edge of the boat. But the biggest risk comes from the water temperature. Just slipping and falling into the sea will paralyze the body within a few dozen seconds, making rescue almost immediate if you want to keep alive.
Yeah, it's a nice one, isn't it? Yeah, good size, good.
Fishermen who work in this profession understand that every action, every pull, and every decision must be absolutely precise. Just one moment of subjectivity is enough to turn a trapping session into an irreversible situation.
Nice.
The Barents Sea and the cold waters of the North Atlantic are facing an unprecedented paradox. Two invasive species, one a Soviet experimental program, are now a huge source of profit and a silent warning about the changing ocean. King crab helped Norway create a billion-dollar empire. Invasive lobsters brought a new market whose growth rate never slowed down. But behind the numbers are two opposing forces. One force pulls humans forward through economics, markets, and profits. Another force pulls the seabed down through the silent decline of native species and ecological networks that are bent to the will of the most powerful. And the ultimate question for us is not whether to eradicate or exploit these two invasive species. The question is whether humans are capable of controlling the consequences that we have inadvertently created.